Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Wait, Are These Guys Friends? I am Mike, and then there is the one that I debate week to week. What is the status of our friendship, the status of our interpersonal relationship? Randy, how are you? How's your week been?
I'm doing wonderfully. I think that's why we always say wait, right? Because we're never
Yes.
100% sure.
There have been weeks where I end the week and I think, man, I'm just on the same page with him. And then there are weeks when I end the week and I think, that's we're friends because we work together. Got it. Understood. So
Stockholm
and
syndrome. We spent too much time together.
before we talk a little bit about just some of the general things we watched this week, our topic is going to be we both picked three movies that we love that are just random movies. They aren't necessarily big, huge blockbusters, though I think one or two may qualify. We're going to see how the other feel about them, discuss the movies. And I already know that one of your lists, and I'll let you figure it out later. I mean, you probably already have mine. I'm like, I don't love this movie. I don't care. I don't love this movie. So we'll see how we feel at the end of that.
Of the three, like if it's one of them, I'm gonna fight you. The other two, I could be justified with. So,
Oh man, what a tease. Stay tuned. Don't fast forward. As for where we're at now, we often like to talk about what have we watched this week? What have we consumed this week in media? Last week we were a little too busy for that, and we had just a massive topic to cover. This week, I think we both were able to watch a few things, unwind with some stuff. Randy, what have you watched this week that you've been into?
so it just got recently released to Netflix. It originally aired on Showtime, but it was called Super Pumped. It was a limited series about basically they called it the rise and the fall or the rise of Uber. Joseph Gordon-Levitt was the main character. Kyle Chandler also involved. Carrie Bechet. There a decent amount of actors and actresses in this, and it was really interesting just because Joseph Gordon-Levitt, for the most part, and I'm sure someone could hit me up to let me know otherwise, it generally plays a nicer character or a positive side character, and the head
I mean,
of
I'll fight that. I've seen 500 Days of Summer. That man's a fucking dirtbag in that movie. His biggest role, he's a trash human. Unless you're one of those film bros who's like, but no, he's in love. It's healthy.
that would be a good point. I guess I was thinking of the other ones with 50-50, or it's other things from the Dark Knight Returns or Rises. Sorry, Dark Knight Rises, and he plays a complete like bro douchebag in this. The guy who basically is right and won't be told otherwise. I mean, he successfully kind of brokers his way into a giant valuation for Uber, as Uber was really kind of coming into as being a much needed and wanted service, and people were vying for it left and right. But it's basically goes through the back and forth about how he tries to keep kind of doubling down and whether that works and whether that doesn't. And it's probably 6 or 7 episodes just, and I kind of blew through all of them, all about 45 minutes long.
It's fascinating because I do want to watch that, but I feel like there's been a real push lately, and it could be just one of those things where when something hits, Hollywood immediately makes 10 different versions of that type of thing. I feel like the corporate biopic has been big lately, and they haven't all done well, but it's definitely been a push. We had the Michael Jordan shoe movie, which I believe bombed because everyone's like,
Yeah.
it's the movie about just the shoe. I think I'm all right. On the flip side of that, you had the BlackBerry TV movie and you had the Tetris movie, which I think was on Apple. Those are both great. I was a big fan of both of those.
I never saw the Tetris one, but I did like the BlackBerry one, definitely.
The Tetris one I thought was a little stylized, but there's a great YouTube documentary by the channel Gaming Historian that talks about the history of Tetris if you
Mhm.
want a pure documentary look, and the story beats were the same. And I trust the Gaming Historian channel, so I'll be like, I know they took a few artistic liberties for the movie, but the
Okay.
gist of this is true. And I'm like, man, what a
It's
crazy
nice to see
fucking
that based
story.
on a true story was actually based on a true story and not the the usual. We're going to take three things that happened and make up the other 150.
It's interesting too because I feel like so many of like the bigger corporate movies, and I have a real issue with maybe I'm a little tired of corporate culture in general. So maybe let's not turn corporate products into movie heroes. That's just me personally. but I guess when the movies are good, what are you gonna do?
What this series did is it sort of shows how the conventional, what would be smart business and what would be things that would help out users and help out all the people were
Mhm.
would be wise and still be lucrative. And it's how Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character was just like, no, I'm going to run the world. Like I want the big, just became what's the word, egomaniacal, and just wanted everything. And so he sort of became the bad guy, even though he was the main character. And so I think it worked a little bit better there, where it's still obviously that corporate
Yeah.
structure and how corporate comes on, but at the same time, you're sort of rooting against him, which is a weird dynamic.
That makes sense because I feel like, and correct me if you feel differently, in the real world, not just movie world, which is scary to be in. Uber's kind of become one of the most hated companies on the planet, despite creating a revolutionary resource that a lot of people thought was amazing. Because at this point, like I travel a lot. We talk about this on the show. We talk about this on my social media. I travel a ton. I've gotten to the point where I just take taxis again
Mm.
sometimes because the cost isn't saving me. I'm usually able to get one right away without waiting. It's at the point of why are we bothering with an Uber? And the fact that like the Wendy's controversy to date this episode that happened in the last week, where they're talking about we want to introduce Uber like surge pricing to change the prices of our menu at different times. That's supervillain talk. That's supervillain
Yeah,
talk in corporate America. And that's coming from fucking it's there when they're calling it Uber style pricing. Hey, you're the bad guy here.
yeah.
You have turned yourself into the bad guy.
It's and with pricing as much as it is on fast food right now, I mean, I can't imagine to increase that to another. It's yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah. And I will say, I sent you a photo of this last night. This isn't talking necessarily media, but I'm currently in Kansas City, Missouri on a job as we record this. I'm sitting in a hotel room recording before I head off to do some gig work. And I needed dinner last night, and the fucking marketing got me. They got me. I was like, I shouldn't do this, but I gotta fucking try it. I tried the pizza, the chicken pizza from KFC. What a fucking no. No, I got ripped off. I got ripped off so fucking hard. That picture looked so good. And then I sent you the photo. It's just it's they dumped some pizza sauce on some chicken fingers and they called it a day. They didn't even put pepperoni on it. It's a pizza. The picture had pepperoni, Randy. The picture had delicious looking pepperoni, and they're pulling the chicken apart, and there's delicious cheesy goodness. No, they dumped pizza sauce on some chicken fingers, and they put some shredded cheese on top of the pizza sauce. And you could tell in the picture that like they didn't melt the cheese; they put it on the hot chicken. And you, if you ever put cheese on something that's hot, a lot of times it doesn't fully melt.
Mhm.
It just like starts to melt and then the food cools and the cheese stops melting because, well, it's like I've lost all the heat. That was the status of the cheese on my pizza, my cheese pizza.
As as
And I,
as I texted
yeah.
you back, you basically got chicken tender parm. That's what you got.
Yes, yes. I got hospital cafeteria level chicken parm from KFC for dinner last night. I texted another mutual friend of ours who I think we've mentioned on here a couple of times, Max, and he sent me back and he's like, I'm laughing so hard. And I feel bad because he's like, that's your dinner. You're just in a hotel and that's what you have. That's your dinner. You paid for that. That's your dinner. And I was like, I know. It's okay.
And I'm guessing KFC not ringing our lines to for
Yeah,
sponsorship for
it's
this
weird.
podcast.
We no, that's crazy. I did get an email, and I won't say from who, a few days ago about a sponsorship thing that was like, I can't tell if you're a bot or not, so I ignored it. And it was I could be costing us millions, Randy, millions. Actually, it wasn't a cash offer. It was like a collaborative thing to be
Mm,
like, let me help yours and I'll help mine. And I was like,
yeah,
I'm good. I'm all right.
well played. I think
I don't want to have to give Randy any revenue to help support his family.
that's good. It's a smart idea. So save it all for yourself.
That's the plan. Honest to God, I'm trying to think of what I've watched this week. And we talked, I think it actually got cut out of the episode, so people wouldn't recognize this or remember this. I had been doing a Red Dead 2, Redemption 2 replay on PlayStation, and I finished that this week. And that game is so perfect. And the lasting legacy of me playing that isn't wanting to talk about the game, is in the epilogue of the game, the character builds a house, and it's in 1907, and they're, like, building a proper, like, house in a field in, the wilderness, and there's this song called the Home Builder Song that they play over the montage that is the best country song you've probably never heard. And I have listened to that song since I finished playing the game this week about 10 times. It is so fucking catchy. And I was just like, God, this is a banger. I love this song.
Wow.
Yeah,
Careful. You have to
we're
pay
gonna
for
get
that.
sued. The one episode we did with the Joe Pesci clips where we actually played the album?
Yeah.
I got flagged for that on YouTube. It's got like a big it's got a big yellow exclamation point. Like, we're leaving this up, but we're not happy about it. So there you go. Before we dive into our episode proper, is there anything else you want to talk about that you watched this week?
Only on the second episode of it, but the Walking Dead latest spinoff with Rick and Michonne is really really good. The next two, I know you're a big fan of the graphic novels, not maybe as
Mhm.
much of the TV show. It's
Could not stand the fucking show. I tried.
oh, there you go.
I
So
got into 3 seasons, and this is probably, considering the show went for 90 years and is one of the most money-making popular shows of all time, my opinion here will hold very little weight. But I truly think that firing Frank Darabont after the first season was one of the, and I say firing, it may have been a mutual, this isn't gonna work thing, I don't recall, was one of the worst creative decisions they could have made.
Mm.
That it did take it to non-comic places in that first season, but I thought the tone was right, the energy was right. I enjoyed what they were doing. And then that second season on the fucking farm where they just, oh my God, that fucking farm in the second season, it's so boring. And of course, spoiler alert for something 90 years ago, of course, the little girl's in the barn. Also, from a comic book standpoint, I got one more hard note I want to make. I'm so sorry. Shane died. No, Shane didn't die for a couple more seasons, right? 3 or 4 seasons in, as I recall.
Not a couple
Yeah.
more.
Um,
I think maybe the next one if it wasn't.
okay. So basically my
They show
issue,
him. That was the big thing. They showed him changing. Like that was the
yeah.
big
And
filming thing.
my big issue with that is that, so in the comic books, Shane doesn't make it out of Atlanta. Shane doesn't make it to the farm in the comic books. And my favorite character in the comic books, hands down, is Dale, the older man with the hat. And the problem is everything that he should have been doing in the show, they gave to Shane because Shane wasn't dead. And I thought his character in that show is obnoxious, and he's the one doing these debates. Dale is the level-headed, mature, he's seen the world, he's older, his wife had passed. It landed a different kind of debate to be talking to Rick, who's younger with his family. It was like two very different places in the world viewpoints talking about how to navigate this new landscape, as opposed
Right.
to what it became in the show, where it was a love triangle issue, really, more than anything.
Mm.
And I just really hated what that became. And I know that's a rant I had to go on. And I think maybe that's part of what, aside from the boringness of the farm, it all felt wrong to me, and it drove me away.
The first two episodes here of this spinoff have been nice callbacks to early season 1 and 2 when interesting things were happening.
Okay.
And don't get too accustomed to these characters you meet, and like things like that. Where so it's not, oh, we're gonna roll with these people. It's like we've been a season and a half, nobody's died yet. This is a zombie apocalypse. Come on, and it's interesting so far. I was not 100% in on trying it again, just because I'm like, oh, there's been so much Walking Dead. I don't know, but so far the first two episodes have been really engaging. Do a good job of not stringing too much out so far. Now, great. Granted, we're only 2 episodes in, but a lot has happened in 2 episodes, and hopefully that continues.
Okay. Well, that's great to know. And it's one of those things too, is knowing what had happened in the show. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, spoiler alert for Walking Dead. In the TV show, Carl died, right?
Yep.
That's so weird to me, because in the comics, Rick died, and then Carl
Right.
is the survivor in
It's
the
like
comic
Carl's
book.
story, right?
Well,
Essentially, isn't that
well,
the
no, only it's always Rick's story until the the second to last episode, and that or episode, second to last issue. That's the shock. In the second to last issue of the entire series, they kill Rick. And they
Mm,
didn't announce that it was the end of the series ahead of time. That was what floored fans. They had been releasing, because in comic book world, they release comic book advance covers like 3, 4, 6 months out to say this is what will be coming down the line to your comic book shop. Be ready for this.
okay.
And they're always teasers for events and other things. To protect the secret, they released 3 months of fake covers after they planned on ending the series.
Oh,
So in issue, I forget, it was issue, I think 149, they killed Rick. And they went in the letters column of the issue, by the way, next issue is the final issue of The Walking Dead. And people are like,
oh.
what the fuck? And it was amazing. It was really mind blowing. So,
Nice.
but let's dive into our main topic. We've each picked 3 movies that just we like for maybe no particular reason, for reasons we can't necessarily explain. Movies we've seen a lot of times, I'm guessing on your end also.
Oh yeah.
What's your first film?
So I'm gonna start with 1985's Clue, which
Mhm.
you said you'd seen. I know
Not
we
only I will tell you, I want you to hit your summary. I cut you off. I want you to hit it. I want to have a good, concise, beautiful summary. I fucking love this movie. This is a perfect movie. I have no notes. We will not argue about this movie.
Okay, good.
What I want,
I was
what I
worried this
want
was
to
the
hear.
one, and then we were gonna fight. But
No, 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 no. This movie, this movie is perfection. I want to hear your concise. I keep saying concise because
yeah.
we talked beforehand about keeping our summaries tight, and
Mhm.
so I'm being real subtle. Keep it tight, Randy. I want to hear. I just needed to tell you right away. This is a perfect film.
Gotcha.
Please continue.
So on a dark, stormy night, in
Wrap it up. Sorry.
large a large hotel, 6 seemingly unrelated people are brought together. What we end up finding out is they're all essentially being blackmailed by somebody, and that's what is revealed. Suddenly, people one by one within this large house start dying, and we have to figure out who did it. It is played completely as a whodunit meets
Mhm.
screwball comedy, and complete with the rapid fire banter, hilarious jokes, great performances. It's just yeah, I'm with you on this. I can watch it again and again because it's a great movie that just is hysterical and is fun and just a blast.
It's weird because it's a period piece that almost feels like it has a timeless quality though. It's a period piece and yet
Yeah.
it works. It never feels dated. And both in when it was made, when it takes place, it is always just funny and concise and just fast paced. It never lets up.
And what I put in my notes is it really has some Arsenic and Old Lace vibes to it. Like that, I think that's those type of. There's a lot of those older Cary Grant comedies that are really they could still hold up because of the back and forth. The dialogue is funny because of its pace and because of its back and forth and leading you one way and taking a left turn. And there's a lot of those type of jokes in this storyline. I mean, it's written by John Landis, so it kind of makes sense that there'd be a
Mhm.
lot of this zaniness involved. You think about his other movies, you think about Blues Brothers, Animal House, and what's the other one? Trading Places. They're just he really excels at these zany madcap pieces that have some very tip top lines, and so that is something he's really good at.
And this is, you got to think of the era too, 84 when it was probably being written, 85 when it came out and was made. This is top of his
Yeah.
game, height of his powers, John Landis. John Landis in the 80s,
Yep.
my goodness. There's so much happening there that untouchable at the time. Aside from that whole Twilight Zone movie thing, let's not worry about that.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Should I
But
not have brought that up?
it,
I meant to.
but I mean, I also put in here that Marx Brothers too. You think about it; it has vaudevillian aspects to it too, where
Mhm.
it just all of that stuff. I think about it where it's I forget specifically which one it was, maybe Miss Scarlet, and something has been revealed about her, and her ties to communism, and she
Communism
asked
is just a
Wadsworth
red herring, you have to
a
understand.
red herring, right? Yes, of course. um, how did you know that? And Wadsworth goes, "Can you keep a secret?" Yes, so can I. Like, and
Yes,
it's that quick and just throws it away. Like, but there's a lot of those that are just great.
this
Or
is simply talking about Wadsworth. This listen, I love the Rocky Horror Picture Show. To me, this is Tim Curry's best work. And
it's
I know
awesome.
he's done a lot of good work in other things, but to me, if I think of Tim Curry, if I think of his most popular roles, who he was in mainstream pop culture, and I recognize he'd done theater, he'd done video games, he'd done so many things, right? But if you take the critical eye aside and you look at like what was he, when you think of Tim Curry, what are his probably his most popular roles? I'm going to say three movies, and the things that the mainstream public could pick him out from. That's Rocky Horror Picture Show, Clue, and Home Alone 2. Those like,
Yeah, I'd throw it in there
oh
too,
yeah, yeah,
probably,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I would. You're right. That's maybe being a TV movie. It slipped my mind, but yes, I would definitely
Mm,
throw it in there as well. But of those, and I think of his resume, he is amazing in Clue. He is so quick witted
yeah,
and fast, and his performance is impeccable. And he hits so many notes and layers, and just this movie doesn't work without him. This movie is impossible without
and
him. And I say that not just as his character is the one guiding every scene and keeping the mystery moving and doing it. I'm talking about without Tim Curry in this role, performing it the way he does, I can't see this movie working.
absolutely, and it's well, and then with 25 minutes left in the movie, he just takes over for
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes, just basically recaps the whole movie
Yeah.
in 15. Just and it's an incredible. Just I would love to see how many takes and things like that that took, because it is remarkable the amount of stuff he's able to piece together, and just how they play off each other. It that being said, I mean he I think it obviously holds it together. This is a true ensemble movie though. Like everybody gets a chance to do something funny, to do something great. Like there I can you can list off every character and do a quote or do something that happens
Mm-hmm.
that's great. I do think of all of them, I kind of think Michael McKean steals it. I think as
Oh,
Mr.
yes. Agreed.
Green,
Agreed.
he is, and obviously spoiler alert because he's the guy that's the undercover guy. But
In one
eh,
of the endings.
and I think, well, although you're right, yeah, but that's what really happened, or I don't know how they.
Which, of course, so for the uninitiated, I don't think we've actually hit. I feel like we're ignoring the elephant in the room when we're talking about the movie Clue. If you are someone who somehow doesn't know this movie or younger, which is fair,
Right.
this is literally based off the board game Clue. We're talking about Mr. Green, Professor Plum, Miss Peacock. They're all code names given to these people in this murder mystery house. And they're trying to figure out who's causing murders within the house. And listen, the gist of it, spoiler alert, big spoiler alert for a movie that is from
Yeah,
1985, in a theory that in a way they all did it. Everyone's guilty, everyone's done something, everyone's killed somebody, and they're trying to figure out the order of how this has happened, essentially. And the reason I cut you off for the ending is in when you watch the movie now on home video, like I'm fucking streaming home video. Go to your local blockbuster. Christ above. They have three endings about it could have been this way, it could have been that way, it could have been this. When they release them in theater, they did it like they did the recent Spider-Verse movie where they had different endings and you didn't know which one you were going to get in the theater. That was the same way for Clue. You didn't know who did it when you saw it according to the cut you were going to get. They eventually went with the one where everybody did it and somebody was an undercover cop, blah, blah, blah. But you didn't know that that was the real ending that they were going to go with
yeah.
canonically and how it
And
was going to.
apparently there was an actual fourth ending that was scripted where Wadsworth did the whole thing. He was
Oh,
basically he needed to be perfect. He had this I don't know what it with perfection, and so but they didn't like it and ended up scrapping it. So three was plenty enough. So, but this I it it really it's one of those movies. I think I can put it on, or if it's on somewhere at any point, I'll pick it up and start watching. I think that is what I love so much about it is that it's easy to pick up at any point. And we had kind of talked about you and I how we were going to break down these, and so kind of telling why I love it, why I would recommend it, and it just there are, I think on top of the zany pieces, there are just certain scenes that sort of stick out. I mean, I talk about when the cop comes and they're already I think 3 dead people in the manor, and they set up this in different rooms. They're dancing to the crew cut shaboom and holding up the dead people while they're dancing, and he's like, "I'm sorry, this is all too shocking." And the cop just goes, "There's nothing shocking here. These guys are just having a good time." It just that kind of scene, just that kind of orchestration. I sort of attribute to John Landis. I'm not sure if he wrote it that way, but it is definitely indicative of a lot of his movies of that time, and it's fun to worth checking out. The one other thing we were trying to tie into these movies, and then we can get into your first
Just
one, is we wanted to talk about a personal memory we had from each of these. Personal memory. This is one of the first movies. I mean, it's funny you brought up tape and VHS. Is that this is one of the first movies I can remember that I had a tape of, that I taped it off of TV. That it was on God knows what. I mean, I go back to before where I grew up. Before Fox became a channel, there was just a local station that would play, especially on the weekends, would just play random movies that no one's ever heard of. But they, every once in a while, someone would come in and Clue would come in. So I taped it and we just watch. I wore that VHS tape out. And and one of the things I always remember is the local Ford dealership and the Toys R Us commercial from from like that time frame, whatever it was. And always fast forwarding through that. But it's funny. I went and looked up the Toys R Us commercial just because I was curious. And I'm like, wow, I remember every frame of this commercial because I've probably seen it subliminally 100 times, even though it was at triple speed or whatever.
so this wasn't the first movie I was going to talk about, but you had just mentioned while watching Clue, you love the scene where they're pretending that the dead bodies are up and animated and dancing around. And so so I would like to talk to you about Weekend at Bernie's 2.
Oh
Weekend at
no.
Bernie's 2. Now Weekend at Bernie's 2. Have you seen Weekend at Bernie's 2? I'm going to give my recap, but you've seen Weekend at Bernie's 2.
uh I have it has been a while and intermittent, but I got the gist, and so I'm looking forward to
So,
this description.
for the uninitiated, I feel like I have to give a quick recap of the original Weekend at Bernie's, seminal classic that it is. Two 80s business bros discover fraud in a company. They are invited to their boss's palatial beach estate for a weekend. He invites them down personally to celebrate the fact that they're going to save this company. You found this fraud. Guess what? Twist. The boss is causing the fraud. He has hired an assassin to kill them. They are going to be murdered. However, there's a double cross for some mafia bullshit reasons, and the assassin kills Bernie. The assassin murders Bernie. And the two bros find him. And right as they're figuring out that Bernie is dead and this thing, a big party starts. And everyone kind of doesn't realize Bernie's dead. And for the next hour of the movie, the bros decide to not reveal to anyone that Bernie has died and just live in his beach estate and hang out and have a good time because they can just get a free ride right now with Bernie. And we've joked about the career of Jonathan Silverman, about how he never quite made it. And one of the business bros is Jonathan Silverman. And the other one is Brat Packer Andrew McCarthy. And if the first movie was genuinely a hit, Weekend at Bernie's was a hit enough to get a sequel. And eventually, the assassin is freaking out because he thought he killed Bernie, but he keeps seeing Bernie alive at all these parties and all these things. And it all comes to a head where, finally Bernie is revealed to be dead, but the finance bros get away with, not being in trouble for not turning anyone in because they're like, oh yeah, the assassin did it, blah, blah, blah. We found this fraud. Everybody's a hero. End of first movie. Second movie starts. Second movie, Weekend at Bernie's 2. The first scene in the office. So much for my concise intro. I had to get Weekend at Bernie's 1 recapped before I could even talk about Weekend at Bernie's 2. Right?
Context, right? We absolutely need context.
The second movie starts, and the first scenes are the two finance bros, Andrew McCarthy, Jonathan Silverman, in their new boss's office, or maybe Bernie's boss in the office. And they think they're about to be promoted for finding that fraud in the first movie. But frankly, rightfully so. They're like, why were you at Bernie Lomax's apartment or beach estate the weekend he died and also bringing us this fraud? And they're like, no, we discovered the fraud. We're heroes. They're like, it's a little fucking weird. You're fired. And they're like, oh no. And then they put like a internal investigations private eye on them because they think that they've embezzled the money that was fraud. And frankly, when I recap it, I don't like to side with corporations. The corporation seems right in this regard. The optics are fucking suspect.
Yeah.
So we had talked about Rocky Horror Picture Show. The internal investigator in this movie is played by Barry Bostwick, who played Brad in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, nice. Mayor in Spin City, right?
Yes, exactly. Long story short, the finance bros figure out that where Bernie had stashed the money, but that he had embezzled in the first movie. No, they need Bernie to sign off in person to get the money out. So they go bust Bernie's corpse out of the morgue, and they're going to take him down south to get the money and do what they did in the first movie and act like he's alive. Here's the big twist for Weekend at Bernie's 2. There's a voodoo priestess down south who also wants the money and puts a spell on Bernie that he is going to reanimate and lead them to the money. The spell is fucked up. And now Bernie only reanimates when music is playing. So they wind up at this resort in Florida or in the Caribbean or somewhere. And now Bernie stands up and dances to where the money is located and hidden away whenever music plays. And they all have to race to the money. It's like it's a mad, mad, mad world, except they're all being led by a zombie corpse they're fighting over. I fucking love this terrible movie. It is a terrible movie. It is a bad movie. I adore that it exists. This movie is the type of movie that could not be made today. No one would give millions of dollars to a sequel about a reanimated dancing corpse leading people to treasure, Randy. I love this movie. Terry Kaiser, who plays Bernie, has been going to conventions for years, simply at like retro cons and comic cons, off the fact that he played a mute corpse for a movie and a half. He talked in the first half of the first movie. He was alive. This movie is insane.
I will say he deserves accolades, a Lifetime Achievement Award, or something for the sheer physical comedy he's able to pull off. And that's like, I mean, it is unbelievable how he is able to feel like seem limp and lifeless while moving at the same time. Like it is remarkable for over the course of 2 hours worth of 2 different movies.
In the first movie, he's so good at just being limp, lifeless, dead. And in this one, the physical comedy is taken so much higher because he has to get up and move and dance, but still be mindless and dead. And then as soon as there's always so many reasons why the music stops. And then he just fucking stiff as a board collapses down because he's dead again. And he's being followed by these two like Caribbean dudes who put the curse on them, and they're trying to rescue the body, and everyone's fighting over it. And in between all of this, Barry Bostwick, who followed them down to follow the fraud, is seeing Bernie alive and seeing them, and he slowly goes insane to the point where he's arrested and like winds up in a mental institution briefly, I think, and or at least he's under psychiatric evaluation. And then rewatching a scene last night, I thought of the Titan sub disaster from this past summer, to really bring it down a minute. But there's the climax of the movie where this always bothered me because they finally figure out to not have the music stop. They put headphones on it. That's a pretty, that you figured it out. But then he walks into the ocean, under the ocean. He's walking on the ocean floor, listening to the headphones. The tape player never shorts out, and that always bothered me, even as a kid. I know how electricity works, but
voodoo.
You're right. It's a voodoo tape player. But as Voodoo Bernie is strolling across the ocean floor, God, describing this movie is insane. Voodoo Corpse Bernie is walking across the ocean floor to the buried treasure in the ocean that for the embezzled money. Barry Bostwick is on an underwater sub tour, and he looks out and he sees Bernie walking through the porthole on the ocean floor, and he snaps in the sub and causes a big disturbance. And I'm like, wow. I love this terrible movie simply for the fact that this insanity exists in the world. This is not a good movie, Randy, but it's fun. And it's the fact that happened. Imagine going to Disney today. And it wasn't a Disney movie, but like imagine going to a big studio today, right? Somebody who's making Marvel movies and things like that and be like, I got a pitch. Okay. Zombie corpse. Dances to buried treasure.
Lots of coke being done is my guess.
Anyway, do you I do have my personal memory. And also, if you haven't figured it out, I 100% recommend people watch this movie for every reason I just said above. Now it says, why would I recommend? It's not would I or wouldn't I recommend. I clearly love this movie, but it's why would I recommend this movie to people was what we were going to try to say. Everything I just said about this movie is insane. Do you have anything you'd like to say before I hit my personal memory on Weekend at Bernie's too?
No, I think I I wanted to get the physical comedy bit in there just because I wanted to like acknowledge
Yeah.
Terry Kaiser and his brilliance in that regard. But no, please proceed with your
So
personal memory.
it's not necessarily a movie. The movie is about Bernie. There's one of my dad's drinking buddies was named Eugene. Eugene was a Vietnam vet who was a pretty tight-lipped guy. Didn't always, we go to like camping and fires, and he had a cabin, and he was an older fella, just kind of sat quietly and hang out. And yet, when he got rip roaring drunk, he looked like Bernie, and then he knew it. He would do the best Bernie impression of walking around like
Wow.
the dead corpse. This guy who like sat quietly and talked and was a little not intense, but just he'd lived a life, right? They all have a few beers and everyone's hanging out, and all of a sudden he just shoots up and he leans back and he does like the drunk, like half the weird look Bernie does. If you look it up, guys,
Yeah.
look up weird, like dead, contorted face look. And he'd march around the campfire and everyone would be like, "Ah, Bernie, Bernie."
Wow.
It was great. So yeah, what's your what's your second movie, Randy?
I have a feeling it's the one you may not like, but that's all right.
No, please.
um,
I
it
have
comes
Weekend
from
at Bernie's 2 to comfort me. It's
that's
fine.
right. So I'm picking it's a vigilante film from 1999 called The Boondock Saints. I can already tell from your reaction. Uh,
Listen, this is a divisive film anyway. I feel like you
yep,
often love it or hate it. And I'll be honest, I don't say I hate
very true.
it. I just have never cared for it. But please continue.
Fair. Okay. So the idea of this movie, there are two fraternal twins, essentially orphans grown up in foster care that are they kind of just they work in the stockyards. They just do this. I keep seeing you grinning while we're doing this, and this is throwing me
I'm
off.
sorry.
But
I'm sorry. I'm having a good time. I apologize. I was grinning because I'm having fun. I was enjoying our back and forth dialogue and our discussion today. Let me go back to being a stone faced, miserable bastard. I wasn't grinning. I don't
excellent,
have any retort. I don't have anything I was going to say. I am just enjoying myself, but don't worry, that's over. So,
fantastic. All right, great. I've brought the mood down entirely. And
wait, are these guys
anyway, so
friends?
these
Not today.
yeah right, not today. So these fraternal twins live in Boston, and
Yes.
they yes they come across when they're celebrating St. Patrick's Day at their local bar. They come across these Russian mobsters who they have a disagreement with, and then the Russian mobsters come for them the next day, try to basically the one tells the one fraternal twin, the one Russian mobster tells the one fraternal twin, I'm going to kill your brother, shoot him in the head, and they kill the Russian mobster. They get arrested for this murder, but basically the cops and the neighborhood all kind of consider this to be almost like a good deed because they got rid of trash human beings. There's an FBI agent that is brought in to investigate this and talks to the boys, and they say that they have had an epiphany that vigilantism is what they are going to pursue. They're going to take out the scum of the earth. They're going to take out the bad people all kind of culminating, I guess, spoiler alert, with them taking down the main Russian mafia head in Boston at the end of the movie, with some help of, I mean, I guess I could spoiler alert the whole thing,
Yeah.
but
I mean, these
uh,
movies we're talking about are old enough where if you
yeah,
haven't seen them, you may have missed your shot, and we're giving you fair warning to move on, I guess.
indeed. So what happens is the Russian mafia calls in a noted assassin called El Duce to come in and take care of the Boondock Saints, the
Mhm.
brothers. And when they are actually confronted together in one scene, you realize that, oh, El Duce is actually their father.
Mhm.
And so the three of them now join together and go kill the Russian mobster boss. They break in, say they're in nomine patri, et fili spiritus sancti,
Mhm.
bang, take care of him. And that's essentially sort of the end of the movie. So it is very much of its time, that kind of 99 stylized, it I guess it has sort of Lock, Stock, or Snatch, or Tarantino-esque type vibe. So it's definitely trying to be that. The set pieces where they kill the bad guys are just bonkers. They're almost out of the Matrix. It's just very, very entertaining filmmaking to see. I wouldn't call Boondock Saints the best made dramatic movie ever. I wouldn't call it maybe even a good dramatically made movie,
I know I would.
but it is pretty crazy, the set pieces and they go back and forth with that. Also, it features a performance by Willem Dafoe that is as over the top as you can get, and that is saying something for Willem Dafoe.
I don't like this movie, but if I were to say there was something I could get behind, and behind is a stretch, but I'm like, it's hard to not like Willem Dafoe when he's going full out. You know, it's
Yeah.
I don't like this movie, but he is just the scenery he chews. It's hard not to like what he's doing on a personal level.
Hmm. It's so I mean it's we're at an impasse obviously on enjoying the movie. I've watched it a million times. The lines are sort of throwaway sometimes and silly and funny, but it does have I guess a poor man's Lock, Stock is probably a good way
I have
to
a
describe it, I would say.
I have a review I'd like to read, but I want to hit your personal memory of this film first because there's something about the era that before I get into maybe why I don't like this movie or why I have some issues with it, I feel it's era specific for me, which makes me really want to hear your personal memory first before I say anything.
Sure, and it's completely related to that.
Yeah.
That's why. So my personal memory is I didn't know anything about this movie, never heard about it. One of my best friends from home, so I went to college in New York and I'm from Ohio. I was back home on a break, and for the previous 2 or 3 months when I've been talking to my buddy, he's like, "Oh, have you seen this Boondock Saints movie? We watch it all the time." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So I was home for spring break or something, and we watched it. I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I like this movie. I'm gonna go out and buy the DVD." Took it back to college with me, and I sat my roommates down in my apartment. And I was like, "Oh, we got to watch this movie. It's like it's really cool. It's really good," and they all enjoyed it. And then it felt like for the next month, anytime I came home,
Mhm.
that movie was on in my apartment. So it had this. It felt like we, you know, I don't know, we and was other people were sitting in our apartment watching it. So it felt like we kind of did this word of mouth thing. I'm sure I don't know if that's what happened, but so that movie just kind of took over this 6 to 8 week period of my life, and it just was always
That's
on.
how that movie got popular. That's how, because I will not deny that it was a popular movie, especially in that era. And that is exactly how I wound up first seeing it. A couple of years now, we have a couple of years difference between us. You were in college. I was my senior year of high school. And then we
Mhm.
would just go over to my friend's basement and he was like, "You got to see this movie." And there was a group of like 6, 7, 8 of us. And they all got obsessed with it. And I was honestly the only one who was like, "I don't think I like this. I think this is
Eh.
trash." And I have not ever had this is going to sound if any of my Michigan friends listen to this podcast, I have no idea if they do. They're this is going to sound so terrible. I love you guys. I don't always talk to you, but we have a long history. I have several friends in my life, good friends, people I trust, people who I grew up with, who I love dearly, who if they needed me, I would go to them right now. However,
Mhm.
however, I think their pop culture opinions are fucking trash. And I know that if they come to me and they're like, "I love this," I'm gonna fucking hate it. I just
Oh.
know that we just have this diametrically opposed viewpoint. And this is, I don't want to say it's when it started, but it's certainly of the era when we were in late high school, like this group of people sitting around. And I'm like, I don't care for this. I do not like this. And I remember just now, before I read any receptions and reviews on Wikipedia, what I wanted to say to you is why I didn't like this movie is it feels so like a high schooler made it to me. It feels like a high
Mm,
schooler tried to make a Tarantino movie. And I'm just like,
mm.
he lost the nuance and he lost the satire and the wit and just went with the violence. And it never did it for me. And I feel slightly justified. And I realize Rotten Tomatoes is not a good indicator, but
Let's go look at Weekend at Bernie's here if we're gonna be
oh, I know.
casting
Oh,
stones.
I know. But because this works for me in this instance, I'd like to read it anyway. And you know what? To be fair,
Mm.
I'll look up Weekend Bernie's right after this before I hit my next movie because this is a democratic society you and I live in. All right,
There we go.
equal time. However, on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a score of 27% with an average rating of
Oof.
4.7 out of 10. The site's consensus calls the film a juvenile, ugly movie that represents the worst tendencies of directors channeling Tarantino. And I read that I thought of what I was going to say, and then I read that, and I was like, ah, all right. I'm a douche critic. Got it. So, to be fair, Weekend at Bernie's to Rotten Tomatoes.
God, it's gonna be better, isn't it?
Oh, no, it's not. Don't worry, it's not. Boondock Saints has
Single digits?
no 20. And I remember I was looking
Okay.
at Weekend Birdies 2, not the first one. Now I am curious about the first one.
Yep.
Weekend at Birdies 2, 13%.
Oof.
Wait. Hang on. What's the audience score of Boondock Saints? Boondock Saints.
You're determined to win this.
No, now I'm just fascinated.
Oh, okay.
By the way, I would like to note that the Wikipedia says 27% for Boondock Saints. It has dropped down to 26% for the official reviews. However, here is where you definitely win big because the audience score for Weekend at Bernie's 2 is 41% liked this movie. Do you have a
Yeah.
guess for Boondock Saints where it hits?
71.
91% audience score.
Wow.
So
That
yeah,
is so what that means is that people like you who weren't a big fan of it are just not as vocal about it, and the people that like
yeah.
it, I'm not. I mean, I'm a fan of it. I wouldn't call myself crazy about it, but it does seem to have a pretty
And I would
vocal
like to note
fan
that
base. So,
Boondock Saints has a 91% audience score with 250,000 fan ratings,
okay.
while Weekend at Bernie's 2 has a 41% audience score with 25,000 fan rating. So, so yes, the people who like Boondock Saints like Boondock Saints.
Yeah.
I I'm not one of them. So moving on to my second pick, I would like to pick another movie kind of from the era. This is 2001, and yours was 99. And I think I first saw it in 2000 for Bootback Saints. So,
Mhm.
but in 2001, Josie and the Pussycats. And I think this is an incredibly underrated satire of a comedy. It is deeper than anyone expected, and anyone who gives it credit for, gives it credit for. It has it is dated in its references because it is definitely about the boy band Britney Spears pop culture music scene at the time. Like Josie and the Pussycats are updated to be a pop punk band, but the gist of the movie, the plot, is all about how evil corporate America is. And it's fucking
Mhm.
fantastic. Josie and the Pussycats are plucked out of obscurity by a record label, forced to be the most popular band on the planet. It all turns out through subliminal advertising. And this subliminal advertising that makes them popular is also forcing kids and people who listen to their music to buy into the products that these corporations want purchased. They are showing how music has been co-opted by record labels and how they're just driving it for money and not for art. And it's all built around this goofy fucking comedy that, because the trailers just made it look like this goofy fucking girl power comedy, they tried to make it look like Spice World. And which, to be fair, has its fans and can be a goofy comedy, but Spice World is a hard day's night. Spice World is the Beatles making a goofy movie where the band plays themselves and weird things happen to them. Josie and the Pussycats is satire about music culture in the year 2001. And it's worth your
Yep.
time. And I love it. And people just didn't connect with that because they didn't want to connect with it because they didn't take the time to see it. But Randy, thoughts? What do you think of this movie?
I'm a big fan. I also this is and I had mentioned this to you. I was in, essentially Rachel Lee Cook's fan club. I wasn't really, but like I said, once once she's all that started, I was in. I think I told you I watched Antitrust for her, so
You
which
now
is
hang
not a
on.
good
I need
movie.
to dial back real quick. You say when she's all that started, but as I recall, she was clearly a cow in the first half hour of that movie. She had glasses on, Randy. You're talking
And baggy
right,
clothes. I
right.
mean,
And
come
she
on.
was like an artist. You mean to say that 40 minutes into that movie, when she took the glasses off, you were like, wow, I think I'm in love
How foolish of me. Yes. Laney Boggs was not, yes.
now.
42 minutes in Laney Boggs. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Um so no, so that got me, I was watching pretty much anything she was in anyway, but then this movie is just it's kind of wild. Like it just there's a lot going on. Like I think that's the most fun part about it is that if you want to see it as a goofy dumb comedy about a pop punk band, you can see that. But then there's a lot of other stuff if you
Yes.
look a little deeper, which
Yes.
is a lot of
And
fun.
that's to say, when I talk about satire, it's not hitting you over the head. And that's what works about it, is it's there, right? It
Hmm.
was it was overt enough where even as a 19-year-old seeing this, I was like, I see what you're doing. I see, it was my dumbass was able to pick up on it. Right, when the opening scene of the NSYNC Backstreet Style boy band, which is filled with cameos, by the way, just
Oh, it's
of
so
the
good.
time. Donald Faison, who was later on Scrubs, which we'll get to. We did mention off the top. We're going to talk about an episode of Scrubs later. Seth
Hmm.
Green, Breckin Meyer, just all sorts of people who play this boy band. They're just they're flying in a Target plane, and you wonder, and they're talking about other corporate deals. You do wonder, like, all these corporations who gave their logos to do this, like, did they get the joke? Because I bet they didn't get the joke.
Yeah, probably not.
So Rosario Dawson is also in the band. Was this early role for her? Should I go to her IMDb? What was she doing pre Josie and the Pussycats? Because Rosario Dawson has now essentially been, I feel like, consistently famous for 22 years. She's Ahsoka now. She was in Clerks
Was she
2.
in?
I realize I'm glossing over a lot of her IMDb.
Wasn't she in like? Was she in Not Kids?
She was in Kids. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's 1995 Independent Drama Kids. I forgot about that movie. I should
Yeah.
watch that movie again. That's been a long time. I wonder how that holds up. It's a tough thing, right? Because coming of age drama films or even coming of age comedies that you've watched when you were coming of age play a whole lot differently when you watch them later. Like, not
Right.
joking, not ironically, years later, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I watched The Breakfast Club for the first time in like 15 years. And I thought, these kids are fucking whiny. These are, you're, fuck off. Your lives are not that
Get
hard.
over
You're
yourself.
white collar, preppy, rich school bullshit. You got fucking detention. You fucking deserved it. Fuck off. That makes me sound like the most conservative guy right now. I'm the most liberal fucking guy. That was the most like right wing, like America dad comment I've ever had. But I honestly, I stand by it right there. So,
Yeah. No, I wanted to duck in just the du jour, which is the boy band.
du jour
Super fun that
friendship,
the
Randy. Du jour means family. Anyway,
oh, it's so good. The three that you mentioned, Seth Green, Breckenmeyer, and Donald Faison, also all in Can't Hardly Wait a few years prior. So
also, all went on to do Robot Chicken together.
Nice.
So
I did not know
that
that. But two of them also in a band in Can't Hardly Wait, Breckin
yeah,
Meyer and Dylan Faison in a Love Burger. Well done.
my God, they all just stayed friends. That's so heartwarming. Isn't that nice?
So, so, so good.
Wow, I'm touched. And listen, I'm not. It's interesting, right? Because we're not talking a lot about Josie and the Pussycats in the Josie and the Pussycats
Yeah.
movie, because honest to God, they're a little bit blank slates in that regard. They fit your classic female archetype. They're there to help fill the role of moving the plot along. A lot of the most memorable stuff kind of happens around them. Alan Cumming in this movie. If you talk about Tim Curry and Clue and how he's the glue that holds that movie together and what is a funny piece, Alan Cumming is just owning this, stealing every scene he's in this as the sleazy
Yeah.
record executive. Oh, and also Parker Posey, fantastic in this movie. Parker Posey,
Right.
you can't talk about this movie without Parker Posey, who's I believe the lead record executive, Alan Cumming's boss. Stellar film.
Right.
So, what is your third and final movie?
So, actually, going off of some of your satire and from a very similar time frame, actually, from 1999 or 1998, sorry, I'm going with Small Soldiers. At the time, sort of, I don't want to say revolutionary, but with a half animated, half in kind of integrating this stop action, but also CGI with real life.
Yes.
I've been a big fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit for doing animated and real life together. I even kind of liked Cool World, even though it's not a great movie, but it's an interesting premise where animated characters interact with the real world. And this was another example of that, where they tried to have as much of an interaction with the CGI. Again, it was part CGI, part stop motion animation to get with. This is a Joe Dante movie, who known for Gremlins, The Burbs, a bunch of other movies, and really this movie, if you want to call it Toy Story, if Toy Story was Gremlins, I think that's probably a really good way to describe it.
That is so perfect because I was trying to think of a Toy Story analogy because I almost said it was like an adult Toy Story and that didn't feel right. But Toy Story, that's perfect, Randy. Randy, I love that. That's a great because I do enjoy this movie. I want to finish your thought, but I I haven't watched it in a long time. I don't know how it holds up, but I remember liking this movie a lot.
It and it was weird because it got kind of mixed reviews when it came out. I'm not sure what people were expecting, and I think that was part of the problem. And Joe Dante has actually gone on record with saying that he set out to make a movie that was more geared towards teenagers and being a little bit not necessarily adult themes, but more grown up themes than what it ended up being. And it was because all of the toy buy-in, all the sponsorship things. There were Burger King tie-ins with toys for their Happy Meals and all that type of thing. And so when that happened, they had to sort of dial it back a little bit with how they wanted to. And the two factions here, and so I'll get in, I guess, to the description of the movie, where Globotech Industries is this defense contractor, and they acquire this the Heartland Toy Company, and the toy, I guess they're designers, yeah, are looking into the concept of toys that can play back. That's what they call it, playing back. So they are toys that you can interact with. So the CEO picks the Commando Elite for the project, and the Gorgonites are their enemies. And so these are basically G.I. Joe-esque characters for Commando Elite. And then the Gorgonites are more, I don't know, Avatar maybe? Maybe that's kind of a good way to describe it, sort of.
I was just going to call them like they're a peace-loving alien
Yeah,
society.
that's even better. And
fucking hippies. Wait.
So what ends up happening is there's a microchip that is actually meant for the Department of Defense, but that gets initiated into these Commando Elite and Gorgonite toy line. Our main character, Alan, he works at his family's toy store, persuades the delivery driver to give him a shipment of these toys. He activates Chip Hazard, the head of the Commando Elite, which is voiced by Tommy Lee Jones. And basically, the Commando Elite are waging war on the Gorgonites, and they do this within the confines of a couple houses in Alan's neighborhood.
Because the war is real to them. They're Buzz Lightyear at the start of Toy Story, where they don't recognize,
Correct.
feel, or know they are.
Alan and then his crush, girlfriend, played by Kirsten Dunst, they are siding with the Gorgonites because they are on the side of good and peace loving. Where the Commando Elite are they're pretty much assholes. They're just out there to mess some shit up, and they want to erase the Gorgonites, and will do it through any means necessary. The whole thing of how can Alan and Christy fend off the Commando Elite from taking over the Gorgonites, because the Gorgonites have seen a picture of Yosemite Park on Alan's computer and believe that to be their home, and they want to get to their home, and so uh, it basically is a biting satire of the toy industry, of the military industrial complex industry, like, and but it
Mhm,
could
mhm,
piece together within this story, this kind of war story. That the really fun part within it is that the
mhm.
voices of all the Commando Elite, with the exception of Tommy Lee Jones and I believe Bruce Dern, who replaced one of the actors from this other movie that had died, are all from the Dirty Dozen. So really fun. Yeah, so that's kind of a fun
Oh, I
thing.
didn't
So
know
you
that.
got Ernest
That's great.
Borgnine, Jim Brown, um, and then all of
Yeah.
with the exception of Frank Langella, who is the lead Gorgonite. Is it Langella, whatever.
Bacon and jello. It's Spinal
Yep,
Tap.
yep. It is the
I just
three
looked that
cast
up.
from
That's amazing.
this is Spinal Tap. So
I stole
there's
your
some
thing. I had
really
no idea.
that is a really fun Easter egg thing from the voices
Yeah,
that comes in
I
there.
had no
So
idea.
it kind of hits you over the head who the good and the bad guys are. I mean, even
Oh,
the
yeah.
Commando Elite all look like bro dude assholes. Like,
Of
and
course.
so it's and where
Which,
the
Tommy Lee Jones, great voice for that. Amazing
right,
voice for that lead character.
it just
There's a reason
it's
he
super
plays the roles
fun.
he plays.
It is, and I think it really has Joe Dante as the director, his stamp on it, where he brings fun and entertainment. I think he puts things that are very kind of uncomfortable settings, whether it's violence, whether it's horror,
Mhm.
whether it's those type of things. He puts those elements in a packaging that mutes them a little bit and makes them, you kind of see them for the silliness that they are. And I think I mean, he did that obviously in Gremlins to an extent. He did that in the Burbs. I mean, Burbs is more of a comedy, but there's still some little freaky parts to the Burbs. And I think he does that well here, where, there's one scene where the Commando Elite, they've concocted like a nail gun cannon and they're shooting it at Alan and his dad. And it's just like, oh, like this is not like this is like actual like tangible violence that could happen.
It always fascinated me years later because I watched this movie a lot when I was younger, and I'm not a big fan of the Transformers films, but
Mhm.
Alan's dad in this movie is also Sam Witwicky's dad in Transformers, and I just thought, oh, you found your niche. You found your niche. Good for you, Kevin Dunn. Good for you.
Amazing in Veep too. So that's
Oh yeah, I've only seen a few episodes of that. It's one of those. Have you ever watched shows where you know you need to watch it and you've watched a lot of clips online that have no real context for you, but you've enjoyed every clip you've seen?
yeah.
That's Veep for me. I've seen so many clips just that have made the rounds, and I thought, oh, I need to watch that show, and I have.
It's fun that we were tying it all together with you talked about a satire. I'm talking about a satire. That is
Mhm.
that unintentionally connected, but one of the most
Mhm.
brilliant satires of all time. It is
I,
so hilarious.
I do want to say too about Joe Dante because I'll be honest, I don't have a lot to say about the movie overall.
Mhm.
You summed it up very well. It's a fun movie. It's an underrated movie. It's it's definitely got the satire, but it does hit you over the head with a little more than some of the others. It's a good watch. It's a good hour
Mhm.
and a half that I believe didn't perform super well, unfortunately. But
It
I think if you
it
showed it
made money,
to
but it wasn't like
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
I genuinely think that if you showed this movie to like a 10 or an 11-year-old, they would fucking love this movie and that you
Yeah.
will get something out of it as well. It's a fun movie. But
It's
I wanted to dial back to Joe Dante, who his resume is so good and yet sparse. And it hurts me because have you heard the term director jail? Where like you
mhm.
make a movie it doesn't do well, and they just decide you're done. He has
Yep.
been in director's jail since Looney Tunes Back in Action, like
Mm,
2003, which wasn't a good movie, but also shouldn't have put him in 20 years of director jail. He's made
no.
TV shows, but he's just been done. And you think about his career before that in the 80s and 90s, he didn't do a ton, but what he did was so good. And it,
Yep.
it breaks my heart that he hasn't been given more opportunities to make more films.
It's completely agree. That's funny you say that just because it's probably 4 or 5 years ago when my son was 7 or 8. Like he found Looney Tunes Back in Action and did not stop watching it for 6 months. I mean, it just
I don't
it's
think, listen, I get the movie bombed, and there are better Looney Tunes properties out there to watch. I didn't think it was terrible.
yep,
7 or 8 year old, great introduction. It's fine. It's good content for the Looney Tunes and should have done better than it did. But
yep.
and also this could be an argument, but I hope it's not. In fact, I really hope it's not. I will defend Gremlins 2 to the day I die. That is a brilliant movie that is just balls to the wall. When I talk about like Weekend at Bernie's as a bad movie that I can't believe got made, that I just respect everything they went through, even though it's really not a good movie. Gremlins 2 is that, but good. I say it's a
Mm.
good movie that just, my God, the fact that that movie exists is astounding.
It's very very true. Two other quick notes, and I can get on to your. We can get to your third. Um, this and for whatever it is, this is the last movie Phil Hartman was ever in. So it
Yeah,
is, and
yeah.
just a I don't know how I feel one way or the other about that. It's a worth noting just because he's such a brilliant performer. But it
And correct
his
correct
it
me if I'm wrong. I believe released posthumously as well.
yeah, unfortunately, yep, that's tough, tough. But I mean, worth celebrating, I suppose. He's
I
career.
was going to say it's a shame too because he was so good on SNL and news radio and small guest roles. His movie output was never prolific. They cast him in the 90s, I feel like, in a lot of random dad roles. Like he was in that Sinbad movie.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yep.
what? He was funny, but like what a waste of fucking talent. You're just sticking him in the generic white guy dad role. Like, what are you doing? That's a waste of
It's
talent.
he and I feel like I've heard this on other podcasts bringing it up on and so I married an axe murderer. He is the Alcatraz prison guard. He's in the movie for like 5 minutes, and he just has, and it's that's I think like he can clearly be in a movie as as main character, and he's been in a lot of them. But I mean, he's so good in that realm where it's just I'm going to put you in for 6 minutes, and you're going to be you're going to steal most of the movie. He's so funny in that. But the one line that I had from him is that they're trying to tell because he plays Kirsten Dunst's dad, and they're trying to tell him about how the toys are essentially alive, and his he goes back and forth and goes, "All right, whatever. What's next? A wooden boy stops with a talking cricket, stops by with a talking cricket." I just it's the way he delivered that, just great stuff. But the one last thing I've got is my my personal memory from this, and this gets off the rails even more, which is just it's so much fun. It's related actually to the soundtrack to this movie. We watched this would have been my senior year of high school, so maybe junior senior year around then. And we watched this movie a lot. I was on the basketball team at my high school, and we would have Thursday night get-togethers where we'd have like team dinners and then watch a movie. And we watched Small Soldiers a lot.
That's great.
And there's a song, the soundtrack from this had a lot of uh remixed or hip hop interpretations of 70s rock songs, which
Mhm.
was a random thing. That was a thing that was going on, I guess. But and I can't believe these are words that don't make sense together, but there was a cover of War, What Is It Good For by Henry Rollins and Bone Thugs and Harmony
Holy shit.
with Tom Morello on lead guitar and Flea playing bass. It is. I mean, I know you've told me many a times, hip hop not necessarily your thing. This has more of a almost that rock metal type thing that was going together. It's not Limp Bizkit. It's way better than Limp Bizkit, but
Yeah,
but we listen to this all the time in the locker room as like one of our pump up songs. So
that's
that is the
great.
memory I completely remember from that. Is that watching that movie at team dinners and then listening to the war. What is it good for in the locker room? It's a fun memory.
That's great, man. My final film. And I feel like you might think that this is going to be a Weekend at Bernie's 2-esque situation. It is not. This is a sequel that is as good as the original. For some people, in fact, noted like a lot of horror critics online, this movie is better than the original to them for some. And you may think that's sacrilege because the original is so good. Tremors 2 Aftershocks.
Mm.
This movie is fucking awesome. It is so much fun. It keeps the spirit of the original. It brings back two cast members from the original Tremors. It brings back Michael Gross as Burt Gummer, and it brings back Fred Ward as not Kevin Bacon's character because I never remember Earl Bassett. There it is, Earl Bassett. And man, this movie is just a good time. It was written to have Kevin Bacon in it, but they basically just replace his character with another guy to the point where Earl Bassett, or to the point where Burt Gummer at one point goes, "This the new guy," and they move on, and he does almost everything that Kevin Bacon would have done.
Okay.
But it's still a really fun movie. The plot of Tremors 2, it turns out that after the first Tremors, the town of Perfection managed to blow this up to the point where Earl and Val were like on the cover of Time. They parlayed this into different career aspirations. Val married the student researcher girl from the first movie. They're not in it. They're off doing something. They reference something like Val got his happy ending. He doesn't want to deal with this with us.
Hmm.
Earl, meanwhile, blew his shot. He put all of his money into a Tremors video game that he didn't secure the rights from, that everybody loves. And then he blew the rest of his money on an ostrich farm that is not making him anything. So he is back to being poor when it turns out in Mexico, they are having an influx of the graboids. And the Mexican government contacts Earl to be like, "Hey, listen, you're the guy. You and your partner, he turned us down. Will you come and do this? We'll give you $10,000 per graboid that you kill." And he's like, "Fuck, this is my shot." The guy who brings him to Mexico, it turns out to be the other guy that takes the Kevin Bacon role. And he's like, "I'll help you with this. I'm part of this now." And it's funny how they do it. I won't get into how. So the two of them are going to hunt all of these graboids. Eventually, it turns out to be too much. And they bring in Burt from Perfection, Michael Gross, dad from Family Ties. And they all just go on a big hunting adventure to kill the graboids. While they're crushing it, they're killing graboids left and right. They're making so much money. The graboids evolve. One of them gives birth, and it turns out that the next step in their evolutionary process that something would be called shriekers. As you follow this franchise, there's more and more evolutions, and they all have their own custom names. And this one, they're called shriekers. They're tiny little baby ones that use high pitched sounds and can swarm an area. And it's so much fun because you go from hunting these worms to hunting these little tiny creatures that are swarming areas and are too much to handle. And they have to change their strategy to try to
Hmm.
survive. It's so much fun. There's still the practical gore of the first movie with the gross effects. It introduces some CGI. The characters are just as endearing. The tone is the same. The this was direct to video, but it was so well reviewed in screenings that it almost got a theatrical release. This movie was filmed 2 years before it was put out on video. There was some funding and distribution issues, but it was so well received anytime anyone saw it, it almost wound up in theaters. It is often cited as one of the best direct-to-video films of all time in how it was received and how much money it made on video because it's just good. It's a fun, good movie. And I highly recommend if you haven't watched Tremors 2 because you think, oh, it's a direct-to-video Tremors sequel, you are missing out on an excellent second chapter.
That's a
Randy?
that's a great synopsis. That this is the one that I have not seen, so I would be interested to check it out. It's I did do it. I tried to do a little research on it just to kind of get sort of accustomed to it as you were describing it. But that's
Mhm,
it
mhm.
sounds, yeah, like it's a fun twist. So it's not hitting every single beat, like staying within
Right.
the beats of the franchise, but not shot for shot or
Yes.
whatever to the
No, it
original.
is 100% its own original movie. They up the stakes. It's not just more of the same. It starts out like it's more of the same, which is why it works,
Hmm.
right? And then it twists and it gets worse and it gets bigger and it's not just the same. They have to find new ways to manage. And there's a quote from Bert, Michael Gross, that was so well received in this movie. They've put it in every iteration since then. That it's they put it they've made 7 Tremors direct to DVD movies,
Wow.
which by the way, everything after 4 is not worth your time because somebody else got the rights and the people that made Tremors 1 were involved with Tremors 1 through 4. And they keep a continuity of style, of tone, of three's not great. It's called Back to Perfection. They go back to the town and there's another, it's not very good. 4 is called I forget what it's for, but it's basically the start. It takes place in the 1800s,
Hmm.
and it it's Michael Gross as Burt Gummer's ancestor and how perfection got its start. And the first time the town found out this happened, and it turned out to be like a secret that was held for many years.
Hey.
4 is a lot of fun. It's very much a direct to video, low budget movie, but 4 is a lot of fun. 3 isn't great. 2 is amazing. Ignore everything after 4 because even though they brought Burt Gummer back and he's the franchise mainstay that's in all 7 movies, they bring in Jamie Kennedy as like his illegitimate son, and they're bad. They're not good. Please don't do it. Michael Gross is amazing in them as Burt.
Mhm.
He'll always be amazing, but they're not worth your time. The line, however, that is so good in this movie that the way he hits it and the way they evolve it and the way it wound up everywhere else in the franchise. You told me we were going to be fighting graboids. These are not graboids. I was deprived of critical, need to know information. And the way that they hit it in this line and the way he delivers it is just so perfect that they kept it going as like his catchphrase every time through. And it's so fun and worth your time. This is my personal memory for this is one of those video store finds that this was pre-internet, right? Or
Mhm.
cusp of internet in the 90s. And I'm just walking the shelves and I see a Tremors 2. And I'm like, what the fuck? There's a Tremors 2? And I watched it in the basement with my friends, and we're all just blown away because you're expecting this to be that movie you heckle, right? Like, oh god, they made a Tremors 2 and we've never heard of it and it's direct to video, and we're all just sitting there in the basement like, this is amazing. This is so much fun. We should watch this again. And it just became a regular watch. I love this movie.
Nice. I
And as you said, you haven't seen it. You don't have any insight on it. You said you did a little research. Is there anything you found or anything that fascinated you when you were looking stuff up?
No, I guess I meant to look at it. How big are the shriekers? That's the one thing I didn't look up visual stuff.
They're this is gonna feel like a niche reference, but were you a Ninja Turtles person or were you a little too old for that?
Yeah.
Do you remember Baxter Stockman's Mousers, or like in the video game, you had like those robot Mousers that like chomped down on people? Do you remember the Mousers?
Mhm. Um, I
They're they're they were Mouser size because they also looked like Mousers to me. I remember that as a kid thinking these look like grubby live action Mousers to me.
so it's kinda like from Stranger Things, right? As I'm looking it up, they're kinda small, like the smaller
Uh
versions of the whatever
oh yeah. I'd buy that. I'd buy
yeah.
that. Yeah. They you know what they
Size-wise
look to
anyway,
me?
so
Yes. If you look up Shriekers online, they're the size of like a I don't know, a large dog.
gotcha.
They're a large dog. And they're mobile and they're on 2 legs and they can charge, which obviously play different than the graboid
Yep.
situation in your classic Tremors.
And they can multiply really fast, right, too, if they get any sort of food source?
Yes.
Isn't that yeah.
Yeah. So one of the times where they think they're going to blow up this thing, and they think they've trapped all the Shriekers. They realize they've trapped them in a warehouse filled with grain, and they're like,
Uh-oh.
"Oh, fuck, yeah." They're like, "Yeah, that's the grain for the compacts, like the Mexican settlement that they're
So
working
they just
on."
start
That's
it's all of a
where
sudden
this.
the thing starts overloading with
Yes, exactly. Like, oh, for fuck's sake. Yes. But a fun movie worth your time.
Cool.
And those are our 3 different movies. And I think we hit a wide ranging spectrum. And so normally we have wrapped up most of our episodes with we are going to talk about an episode of The Simpsons. But we've kind of run into some issues, I feel like, you correct me if I'm wrong, where despite being 30 years, 8 episodes in, we're maybe repeating some points, right? There's not a lot to say. because you can only cover why something's so amazing. I feel like hitting Rosebud, Jesus, that's a good witch cover. Hitting Cape Fear last week was a good point to pause because it is the creme de la creme, the best of the best. And where do you go from there? Because you're going to repeat yourself a lot. Thoughts on that? Am I
Right.
barking up the right tree on that one?
I think so because it would be it felt very much like the first couple episodes where we went from something we really really liked to something that we just didn't like at all, and I think it was pretty evident
Mhm.
that okay, there wasn't much to to enjoy ourselves with. So this is going to feel like a little bit of a fall off, regardless of
Yes.
what we pick.
So the thought was we still like TV quite a bit, you and I. What if we started talking about different TV episodes, isolated episodes of shows we love for different reasons? And you had mentioned Ted Buckland last week, meaning that you were a Scrubs person, that you like Scrubs, you watch Scrubs. The episode that I want to talk about is one of my favorite episodes of Scrubs, which is not one of their funny ones. I mean, it's funny,
Hmm.
but it is Scrubs was known for they would gut punch you from time to time. That every couple, in a season, classic TV sitcom season of 20 plus episodes. Some of them would be so funny, some of them might be middling, but for Scrubs, they always like to have a heart. And I feel like on Family Guy, there was a joke about how Scrubs is a sitcom that isn't funny. And I think they
Hmm.
probably took it more as they just didn't like it. But you could take this as this episode has a dramatic heart and it hits you fucking hard. And in fact, we're not talking about the fact that the episode I'm about to mention has a follow up. The next episode, this episode goes so hard at
Yeah.
the end that there's a follow up episode, which was rare for this show, where they have to deal with the emotional fallout of what they do in this one. So this episode is season 5, episode 20, is called My Lunch. The overall gist of it is that they are juggling at Sacred Heart Hospital 3 terminal patients. They all need transplants, they all need organs. Someone needs a liver, someone needs a heart valve, someone needs a kidney. They're going to take care of these people. And everyone is a little bit stressed. And in the midst of this, JD, he is obsessed, obviously, with his relationship with Dr. Cox, who is his mentor figure, who also, while begrudgingly growing to love him over 8 seasons, also kind of hates him and will always kind of hate him. He develops a respect and a love, but he wants Cox to be his mentor figure. And he is trying to force lunches. He is following him along saying, hey, let's get lunch. Let's get lunch. He happens to stalk him at lunch. He's like, oh my God, you're here. It's all very goofy. He wants him to be his mentor and be his friend. But they find one of their recurring characters. Scrubs is always big on recurring characters. They find character Jill Tracy, someone who had had a lot of mental health issues and a lot of issues where they don't like her, but because they're doctors, they deal with her and they're respectful to her. Here's where a lot of spoilers come in. Jill Tracy dies, and they think it's of a drug overdose. So they are like, here's our organs for our 3 people. It turns out that Jill Tracy, and this always bothered me, they don't say how or why she seemed fine. Jill Tracy had rabies and died of rabies. That is not played as a joke. It is a twist to figure out why these organs were bad. And the last 10 minutes of this episode is as perfect of television, even though it's not funny of anything I ever said. It is a montage to the phrase how to save a life of while they are trying and failing to rescue these 3 patients. It is powerful television as it just gets worse and worse and worse in this, what started as fun sitcom episode. It is the way this episode is structured is fascinating to me because it's not a perfect structure. There are tonal shifts. There are tonal whiplash. I rewatched it last night before recording this because when I suggested it, it was more my memory of it. That I was like, let's watch that, talk about that. Did you rewatch it ahead of this?
I did. Yeah, I watched it last night also, and it really does do that because it's for the first whatever 15 minutes of this episode. It's all the hits of Scrubs, the little fantasies look away, the flashback to something else that's goofy, the interactions with the janitor, with the Todd, with all these different things, and then you get to a point where it just from there on out, from the point really, I got it's kind of when How to Save a Life starts to come in. That's when you're just like, okay, this could have gone a certain way and was tailing towards a different different end. But I'm really, it's showcasing the product of its environment, right? Like this is actually something that happens in a hospital. Like this is that we're not in the TV world where it's the I think Bill Lawrence shows seem to do that type of thing, right? I mean, Ted Lasso always great with that too.
Yep. Yeah. So Bill Lawrence, who created this, was his original kind of baby. He went to do Cougar Town, which also has a lot of heart. I've talked about it last week. Underrated show. Doesn't quite hit the dramatic beats that this show or Ted Lasso would hit. It's definitely maybe the middle child, but it's a fun show. But it's fascinating to me because you do think the emotional beat of the episode is that they were rude and kind of trying to ignore Jill Tracy because they didn't really like her. And then she dies, and you think that's the emotional beat is JD's guilt because they say she died of a drug overdose. Did I ignore a patient that I should have been dealing with? And then no, it's right as his guilt is relieved. Hey, it turns out she didn't die of drug overdose. She died of rabies, which again, a weird turn, but I get where they probably had to pick something that would act fast, right? For this to be a quick
Hmm.
thing. That all of a sudden all these organs are failing.
I don't know too if was that the actual because I know this was taken from an actual story in real life where I guess 4 transplant patients died from but I don't know if it was rabies or not.
I don't remember if it was either. I could look into that, but there was no foreshadowing, which is probably why because they
Right.
couldn't for the twist. But you're right. One of the first notes I wrote here for myself after rewatching was this is a quintessential Scrub episode, not just because of how people liked it or how it was received, but because it hit all the beats. Reoccurring characters, quality cutaway gags, which fuck, come on, Family Guy, you did. I know you're doing maybe cutaway gags before them by a couple of years, but you're in the same wheelhouse. But then aside from cutaway gags, maudlin and heavy-handed emotions, and one powerful musical montage. This is a best
Hmm.
of for Scrubs in that they hit everything that they do. When we talk about the roster of recurring characters, the Todd gets a subplot. Not in love with the subplot for the Todd, aside from the tonal
Agreed.
whiplash, is the Todd works best as a quick one-off gag. I realized that
Yep.
they were probably experimenting because this is their 5th season. Who can we dedicate a plot around? The Todd doesn't work. The Todd is a 2000s gym bro. When you think of a 2000s macho male guy, that's the Todd. 2000s era, it just doesn't work. On the flip side, there are a couple of gags in this episode with the security guard, the tall black security guard who has a hook for a hand, who always worked for me. Who every time he showed up to tell a joke or there was a joke about him, always worked for me. Loved it because he's making out with the old lady nurse. Dr. Cox walks by and his hook goes by, and Cox just goes, I think I just got the move on hand from a hook. And that always made me laugh. I always dug that.
I did like how she wasn't sure. She's like, Todd, is that the guy with the hook hand? I like how she was not sure if that was him or Todd. It was funny.
Yes. On the flip side, this episode aired in 2000. I think I said 2000. This episode aired in 2006. This episode aired in
Mhm.
2006. And that's such an interesting time because if the 90s had full on gay panic in sitcoms, the 2000s were a time where it was more acceptable, but it wasn't accepted, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Is I wrote here that they were a big fan of unseen character references on the show, where Elliot's brother Barry and Dr. Kelso's son were both gay people who were made fun of quite a bit. And they both have
Mhm.
extremely 2000s takes on gay jokes. I hadn't watched it in a long time. It wasn't 90s offensive. It was early 2000s where this is normal enough, but it's still fucking weird and we're going to make jokes about it. A lot of shows
Yeah.
of this era. Also, the subplot for Todd is that he is a macho horn dog who always hits on the women, but they think, well, maybe he's actually gay and he's covering up with something. And then at the end, by the end, they're like, he's hitting on men and women. And they're like, what is your fucking deal? You're so weird. You're gross. What are you? And he's like, oh, I'm just the Todd. And this follows up where something I think I've said before. In the 2000s, people forgot bisexuality existed. We talked about Chasing Amy in the 90s,
Mhm.
how she's she's gay, but no, she's not. She loved a man. Oh, it's so weird. But no, so people forget that bisexuality is a fucking thing. People can just like both genders. Bisexuality is valid and real. And there's this problem with media from the 90s to the 2010s, I would say, where a lot of the jokes and problems on the show would just be solved if people are like, oh, he's just bisexual. And it doesn't
Yeah.
age well for me, that subplot.
Yeah, again, product of the times, I
Yes.
think.
But no matter what else, the How to Save a Life montage, where the desperation of the first two patients die, and JD brings Dr. Cox lunch, and a callback of Dr. Cox had finally accepted and taken JD to lunch when he thought Jill Tracy had died and it was his fault. And they were bonding. And then JD tries to reciprocate, and you just think that they're going to pull Dr. Cox out of it. They're going to get through this. When the guy that had been Dr. Cox's guy, the emotional heart of the episode, Dave, who needed a kidney, who is Dr. Cox's patient, starts to fail. And it all falls apart
Yeah.
because he's like, you didn't know we could have. And Dr. Cox is like, Dave could have waited 3 more months for a kidney. I did this. I rushed this. And it's just so powerful, right? And it's just so good. The problem being is that
It's
amazing montage, the music starts cueing in as Todd walks away from his gay subplot. And I'm just like, oh God, that I don't remember that. That hurt. That was a whiplash.
I think it's important too that JD made the point to tell him you couldn't have
Right.
known. You know, there were 3 documented cases that he comes back on it, and to the point where he said, "I would have done the same thing." And there's some Dr. Cox against type in this when he looks over and says, "Yeah," and I rewound it like twice to say, is he doing that in his normal Dr. Cox, like, yeah, whatever, Sally or Paula or whatever he calls him. But he was legit like in the moment, because he was so broken up by this, to say, okay, someone else in this profession and
Who I respect, even though I won't say I respect him.
sure.
Yeah. Um,
So just powerful moment.
the last thing I will say that I thought was fascinating is this montage, right? Perfect montage, perfect song, cut to the song, just everything about it works. This episode aired in April 2006. That song was released in March 2006. They couldn't have been crafting this episode, cutting this episode, or preparing this episode with that song in mind. And it's so perfect and so well remembered that I just thought, did this song come out and they went to this episode of fucking get it in there? This right now. Like, how did that happen? It fascinates me how that could have come together because everything I found online says this song was released in March 2006 and this episode aired in April 2006. I can't fathom the turnaround of how that perfectly cut iconic montage happened.
Well, I mean, sitcoms are basically taped. They're not taped that far in advance,
No,
right?
no, there
Like,
is
so
definitely turnaround,
I
but
know it's single cam, but
that is, I don't know, it just a month turnaround feels tight to me. And that's my naivete, perhaps. That it seems like a lot.
so there. This is interesting. It would have been 05, 06. When did Scrubs start? 04?
Oh, no, it would have started in 2001 because this was the fifth season.
01, okay. So I can recall being out in LA visiting a friend of mine. This must have been 05. And his roommate was a PA on Scrubs.
Oh, fun.
And so he was talking about how, I don't know if it was Donald Faison or someone else from the show had handed out some new music and things like that. Apparently this was a thing that happened a whole bunch.
Oh, okay.
And it seemed to be certain. So I'm wondering if, and that's just from that one instance, but I'm wondering if they got advance
That would make
stuff
sense.
from
That
certain,
would make a lot of sense.
maybe does Universal have?
They do have a publishing wing. They have that. Universal Music is the whole reason TikTok's fucked up right now because they pulled all their music rights because they couldn't negotiate.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
uh,
So I wonder if there's something there that they just got a little advance notice of here. It's going way back, similar to like the MTV Buzzbin
no,
stuff or
that
whatever.
makes a
It's
lot
just
of
like
sense.
these are things. So I wonder
You
if
should listen to
maybe they
this
got a
song.
advance.
This might work for your show. That would make a lot of sense.
And then they go, "Oh, wow, this is
Yep.
going to fit perfectly,"
Yeah.
and it does.
Yeah. So I don't have really much else to say about the episode. I just thought if we're going to talk about an episode that was maybe quintessential of a show, I think this one works despite its flaws, or maybe this is quintessential because of its flaws. It shows how the show could work. There are maybe better comedic episodes of it, but the show just plays. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I looked up whatever TV.com ratings are if we
Yeah, yeah.
go by those, but just what I'd seen. This is the second highest rated audience score
Oh,
show
wow.
of Scrubs,
What do you know what the
which
first
is
is offhand?
I think it's the one the one with Brendan
Oh,
Fraser
yeah,
where he's
that's a
actually dead.
where it turns out he's dead and he was a ghost for half the
Yeah,
episode. Yeah, that's a good one.
the same kind of thing where there are funny parts, but then
Yep. Yep.
gut punch.
Yep.
Which is a great episode. It really
It
is. It's
is.
just same deal, just concocted incredibly well.
Yes. And it
I
helps.
thought of very highly. So
And it helps too that he wasn't, even though he didn't have a ton of appearances, he wasn't a guest star that was created for that episode. He had done one or two before that as like an
yeah,
established. So you didn't think about the fact that he would. Oh yeah, of course they have to write him out or something's happened to him. He's shown up a couple of times. He'll be back. Oh no.
yeah.
Yeah.
Really good Brendan Fraser performance too.
Agreed.
Very understated, kind of
Agreed.
very chill. I really like him when he's that and not over the top.
By the way, I think did you say Frasier? Because it is Fraser. He'll yell at you.
Okay, sorry. Then yes,
He will yell at you. Brendan Fraser. No
you have
Frasier.
editing, so
No. I'm gonna cut all the parts where I look down and leave all the parts where you look down. So I think
sorry, Brendan.
yeah, and I'm sure he listens. He's one of our like 25 listeners that works.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I think this wraps up this episode, unless there's anything else you want to cover. But
No, I think we got it all.
I'll hit the normal stuff. Please leave some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. It's been a hot minute, so do you hate us now? That's all I want to ask. What did we do to lose your love? We'd love to get some reviews or find out who's listening, suggest some things. We've gotten a couple of little pieces that we're talking about for some episodes, but leave reviews here anywhere that you listen to the podcast. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere else. If you want to reach out, you can email me at Mike Barcode. That's MikeBarcode at gmail.com. Same name on TikTok or Instagram. Anywhere you want to hit us up, please just reach out. We'd love to hear what you think about the show or any thoughts you have on it. But with that, I will personally say goodbye, and it's been a pleasure. Fun talking with you, Randy. A couple of nice disagreements here, I feel like, this week. So, bye.
Indeed. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.